Run.
Are you alright?
Holy cow!
No more! No more! I don't know what to do!
Whatever comes, we'll face it together.
Let's go.
Impact event in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hell yeah, dude. Alright, guys, so Alien Romulus is finally upon us, and man, have I been waiting for this one ever since I heard it was coming out. The Alien movies are some of my all-time favorites. I love the first Alien movie. I love Aliens. Not a big fan of Aliens 3, Alien Resurrection, or, well, the recent prequel movies, which isn't going to be a trilogy anymore. But I even get a kick out of the Alien vs. Predator stuff, too. Like, I just love these films. I haven't had a chance to see Alien Romulus yet. I'm going to see it with my dad on a Sunday. It's going to be one of the only times I can get him in a movie theater. But, yeah, really excited for Alien Romulus. And as I was thinking about how I would cover this franchise for the YouTube channel, I started thinking about, just the general impacts Alien has had on the gaming industry. I mean, everyone knows how influential Alien is in regards to film. I mean, this is probably the sci-fi horror franchise, but I can't think of another franchise apart from Star Wars that has had such a profound impact on the gaming industry as well. Like, there are so many video games that have taken influence from the Alien movies in some way, shape, or form. A lot of them ended up being like some of the most important games in the history of the industry. So I thought it would be fun to, hone in on a couple of genres with entries that, take a lot from the Alien movies. So this is just going to be a little history lesson on the influence of the Alien franchise in video games. So I think the obvious place to start is, of course, with the horror genre. And Alien definitely has its beginnings in this genre as well. Because one of the earliest horror games that I can think of is the 1984 game for the Commodore 64, Alien, based on the first movie. And this was actually a really intricate game for the time, too. Essentially, the premise of the game is that you're the commander of the Nostromo. The Xenomorph has gone on board the ship, and you have to command the crew to complete objectives while making sure they don't fall victim to the Xenomorph. Now, that's actually a really creative approach to the movie. I think anyone's first instinct when making an Alien game is to, just make it a shoot 'em up. But this game actually took an interesting approach using the idea of the film to create this really tense strategy game. And it's more intricate than you think, too, because obviously it's difficult to track the aliens' movements, but you also have to take into account the mental state of the various crew members, so you have to manage that as well, because if they aren't in their right of mind, they could start disobeying your orders, or, that can lead to trouble as well. And there's also the added danger of the fact that one of them is the android as well, and later in the game it'll start turning on the crew members. It actually reminds me a lot of the modern favorite, Among Us, which, for those of you who don't know, involves a bunch of people online trying to complete objectives while one of them secretly tries to kill everybody. The whole point of that game is trying to figure out who the killer is. And because of that, I feel like this game in particular would be really interesting to bring back with a modern take on it. If anything, like how cool would it be to just have like this brief period in Among Us where in addition to, the usual killer you have coming at you, you also had the xenomorph in there throwing a monkey wrench into everything. And like that would just be really cool. But it's not just the game based on the first movie where you really start to see Alien's influence in games. Another really important game in the history of the horror genre would be Project Firestart, also for the Commodore 64. This game definitely has its influences. It wears the influence of the first Alien movie very clearly on its sleeve in regards to the way everything looks. Even this intro, it looks just like the trailer we just watched, doesn't it? But what's interesting about this game is that it actually introduces a lot of the gameplay mechanics that would become commonplace with survival horror games moving forward. Limited resources, enemies that sometimes it's best to run away rather than engage them in combat, puzzle solving, stuff like that. It actually does make for a pretty tense experience despite its age. It's actually really interesting. But yeah, this game wears its influences of the first Alien movie very prominently on its sleeve in regards to how it looks, its cinematic approach to storytelling, and just the atmosphere of the game. Jumping forward a few years, getting into some of the more well-known games in the horror genre. Now, a lot of people might say that I'm stretching saying that Resident Evil took influences from Alien, but come on, guys. Look at the members of STARS. You can't tell me that they weren't at least inspired a little bit by the Colonial Marines. But the thing about Alien is it still does, it does make you think of the Alien movie at times. And the reason for that is you watch the Alien movie and you can't help but think about, a lot of the horror games you play. Part of the reason Alien is so terrifying is because like the claustrophobic environment of the game, it's like a maze in that spaceship, and the fact that the alien is lurking around, it could be right around the next corner, it could be lurking behind you, and that basically means you have one of two choices. You can either run away or you can face the alien, and neither is too enticing because that alien is really fast, and you better pray you have a flamethrower on hand if you're going to face it, because, that thing gets its hands on you, you're basically donezo. So, Resident Evil, it definitely does draw upon, that feeling with the claustrophobic nature of the mansion, the fact that you're in an isolated setting with no people around to help you, not to mention all the monstrous abominations of science that tend to characterize the game. So, yeah, Resident Evil, it's definitely stylistically removed from Alien, but you can still feel the influence there. For a more obvious take on what Alien brings to the table, you have the Dead Space series, and just about anyone who's played this game, they can't help but make the connection to Aliens. I mean, just look at this. This is basically what I always pictured a alien horror game would be like. With the way the ship is designed, how the weapons are handled, facing the monsters. It's just very well done. It's almost impossible not to make that connection to Ridley Scott's movie. And it's even getting to the point where people watch an Alien movie and they also think about Dead Space. I mean, it's funny because we often talk about, the films and movies, comic books, video games that inspire us. But we're actually getting to a point where some films become so influential that when a new entry in that series comes out, it is influenced by the games that it inspired. I've heard a lot of people who have already seen Alien Romulus, and they say it actually reminds them a lot of the Dead Space series, and that doesn't surprise me in the slightest, because, Dead Space has a lot of good ideas of its own, and why not take influence from it as well? So yeah, Alien has had a really profound effect on the horror genre in general. And it's also taken a stab at the horror genre itself as well. Though it's really funny, despite Alien being one of the most, if not the most revered sci-fi horror series of all time, there actually haven't been too many strictly horror-based Alien games. You have the one I was talking about earlier, the 1984 game, but the only other major one I can think of is Alien Isolation. Now, a lot of people who have read my blog know that I'm not really the biggest fan of this game. I always felt it sort of represented all the stuff that was wrong with modern horror games up until the release of Resident Evil 7. But there is still no denying just how well done Alien Isolation is. I mean, like, this came in right in on the heels of Colonial Marines, which was just an absolute train wreck. And for it to take away a lot of the offensive means of fighting the aliens and just, making the single lone xenomorph scary again. I mean, that was just fantastic, dude. Like, the atmosphere of this game is just absolutely unnerving. Not to mention the fact that the graphics are great. This game beautifully depicts that retrograde future that the Alien movies have now become famous for. So, yeah, if you really want a good Alien horror game, it's set in no substitute. Alien Isolation is what you want to play. Moving to another genre, and this speaks more to Aliens than it does the original Alien movie. Aliens, I find, is the more crowd-pleasing movie between the two films. It's actually the one I prefer. I think it balances action, horror, and sci-fi really well. Whereas the slow burn of the first movie, it's one of those films I think you need to be in the right mindset to enjoy. But Aliens is different in that regard. And again, it really has inspired a lot of game designers. Like this scene right here where Ripley is storming the alien hive in order to save Newt. Strapping all that stuff onto the pulse rifle, grenade launchers, flamethrowers. I mean, anyone who has watched that and has played a video game, they can't help but make the connection to a lot of first-person shooters, and that is actually by design because the granddaddy of the genre, Doom, actually took a lot of influence from Aliens as well. In fact, I've heard it in some places, though I can't really confirm this, that the original plan was for Doom to be an Alien video game, but id Software realized very quickly that they weren't going to be able to get the license, so they just decided to do its own thing, swapping out the Xenomorphs for demonic demons, which is pretty cool. And Doom still is one of the best first-person shooters of all time. The way it handles level design, the balancing of the enemies and weapon system, like there's just so much depth to the game that it has just become a big staple in pop culture just as much as the other Alien movies have. And its influence from the Alien movies has only become more prominent as the years have come by, especially with Doom 3. Which, I mean, if I were to just show you this clip right here and not tell you what game it was, I feel like people who haven't seen Alien but are familiar with it would assume it's an Alien game before saying it was a Doom game. So, yeah, that influence is just undeniable. But the thing about Doom is that it still does lean slightly into horror territory. There are a lot of people who do refer to Doom as a horror action series. But that influence from Alien doesn't just find its way into games with a horror atmosphere. And the example I always think of is the Halo series. Now, again, Halo takes its influence from a lot of different films and sci-fi movies. An argument could be made for taking influence from stuff like Dune, Star Wars, or Starship Troopers. But I still do see a lot of influence from the Alien films as well. Particularly the Alien vs. Predator stuff. I mean, Master Chief, the Spartans, and the UNSC obviously take a lot of influence from the Colonial Marines. The Covenant remind me a lot of the Predators, and the Flood very much the Xenomorphs. So, and again, it just takes that influence, but it starts to, mold it in a way that, makes it fresh and new. Like, even though Halo and Doom do take its cues from the original Alien movie, they both still feel like their own beast. And that's something else that I feel like is kind of an inspiration when you're talking about the original Alien film. Because when you think about it, there's nothing original about the film. In fact, the setup itself is very similar to, I think it's It from Another World. I was watching a James Rolfe video about it, and I was reading about it today at breakfast today, and there was a really great line from the original writer of Alien. He said, "I didn't steal my ideas from anyone. I stole them from everybody." And you know what? That's perfectly fine, because like any artist will tell you that if you're in any kind of creative endeavor, getting all your ideas from one source, it's never going to end well. But if you get your ideas from everywhere, if you're infinitely curious, then it's very easy to make something that feels fresh and new. And that's what all these series have done so far. And the last genre I want to talk about, well, we aren't done with the FPS. I need to talk about all the times Alien has taken a stab at the genre. And it's been doing FPS games for a long time now. One of the earliest examples I can think of is Alien vs. Predator on the Atari Jaguar. And a lot of people might be saying, wait, they were making Atari Jaguar games in 2001? No. Alien vs. Predator was a concept long before the movie came out. It was, first teased in the Predator 2 movie, I think. Then there was a comic book series by Dark Horse, and then at some point they started making video games based on the concept. And Alien vs. Predator on the Atari Jaguar is actually a bit more influential than a lot of people realize. Looking at it, it might appear to be a simple Doom clone. And when you play as the Colonial Marine, it kind of is, but it puts a little more focus on exploration and resource management. And in addition to playing as the Colonial Marine, you also get to play as the Xenomorph and the Predator as well, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and goals. So that was an interesting concept for the time. It was a really ambitious game, and there would be like several other AVP games. Most of them first-person shooters. The two ones by, there's one by Rebellion that followed up the Atari game. Then there was another one by Monolith, Alien vs. Predator 2, which was also really good. And then you had another one by Rebellion in 2009, 2008, I think, that not a lot of people talk about, but I don't think it was that bad. But since then, there haven't been many decent AVP FPS games. Mostly because I think people are going to be more hesitant to do that now because of the train wreck that was Colonial Marines. But Alien has still had a big impact on the FPS genre, and if you want to argue even further, let me tell you about Alien Resurrection. Now, I hate Alien Resurrection. It is a very entertaining movie to watch, but there's no denying that it's terrible. But it did give gaming a very, very important innovation, and that innovation is dual analog control. Yeah, believe it or not, that was introduced in Alien Resurrection. Where were you on that one, Bungie? And the last genre I want to talk about before I call it a day is the Metroidvania genre. And again, this just kind of goes back to the setting of Alien, that claustrophobic nature, the maze-like design of the ship. I mean, it just creates this really terrifying atmosphere. And again, you just want to explore the world of Alien. Like, it's just so beautifully realized, especially for 1979. Like, there was no CGI used in this movie. It's just, like, everyone was amazed by it back in the day. And the obvious inspiration would definitely be, the game that influenced the Metroidvania genre is the very first one, the original Metroid. Very clearly, this game has taken its influences from Ripley Scott's movie. In fact, the maze-like and tube-like nature of a lot of the level design in the game was inspired by the setting of Alien, and it was only further compounded by Aliens, with the alien hive and everything. They use that as an idea to create different variation in the levels of Metroid. And yeah, even some enemies would be inspired by the Alien franchise, like the Metroids themselves, for example. You can't tell me like they didn't at least come from the idea of the facehuggers. And if you want to deny it even further, Ridley, the main antagonist of the Metroid series, where do you think they got the name from? He's named after Ridley Scott, who directed the first movie. And again, this influence became even more prominent when Metroid went 3D with Metroid Prime, which again is another one of the more groundbreaking games to come out in the past 20 or so years. Taking the whole Metroidvania concept into a third-person perspective for 3D environment and just doing it extremely well. So every time you've played a Metroid game, Castlevania, or Hollow Knight, you owe a lot to the Alien franchise that you have those franchises, because without Alien, we wouldn't have had Metroid, and without Metroid, we wouldn't have had the Metroidvania genre. There have even been a few that take it in a really interesting direction. One of the more unique Metroidvanias I played is a game called Carrion, which is what you call a reverse horror game, where instead of playing as someone like Samus or Ripley, you're instead playing as the monster. In this case, sort of a thing-looking thing. God, it's hard to describe. Like, I'm talking about the monster from the movie The Thing, which also probably took its influences from it. It's such an influential franchise, my God. And this is probably going to come as a shock to a lot of people, but believe it or not, there actually does exist an Alien Metroidvania game, and that is Alien Infestation on the Nintendo DS. This is one of my favorite underrated games because, like, you hear the idea, like, a 2D Metroidvania based on the Alien franchise, and you say to yourself, really? That exists? But then you think to yourself, huh, that's actually not a bad idea. Hey, you know what? It's not a bad idea. It's actually a really good game. It really does embrace the horror atmosphere of the Alien franchise. It has a much slower pace. Your character isn't as nimble as it typically are in a Metroidvania, but you still do have the firepower. The exploration is still there, and it also has a really good art style too. Like, I remember playing this back in the day, and I felt like I was playing through a Dark Horse comic or something, which is fitting because I think the art was actually done by an influential artist who worked on the Alien series. So yeah, if anything, definitely check out the Alien Infestation if you haven't ever played that. But yeah, I think that really covers the influence of Alien on gaming. It really is remarkable how much of an impact such a simple film has had on, like, just so many different industries. Like, it not only is it a big part of film history, but you just can't talk about video games without bringing mention to the franchise. So, yep, that's the influence of Alien. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I also want to state for the record, tomorrow I am going to be covering an Alien game, and I have been planning to... I've been having a hard time trying to figure out which game I was going to play, so what I decided to do was create a poll in the community tab and let my viewers give it a shot, let them decide which game I would play. But unfortunately, I don't really have a big enough viewer base for that to work. So if anyone watches this video, head over to the community tab, cast your vote, and hopefully I'll have a game picked out by tomorrow. But anyway, that's the Alien franchise, guys, as far as video games concerned. If there are any games that you feel I missed that have a big influence from the Alien franchise, definitely leave it in the comments, because I'm always interested in checking out new and interesting games, especially if they're really obscure like Alien Infestation. Also, if there are any entries in the Alien, Predator, or AVP series that you think would be fun to show for the live stream, again, leave it in the comments. Always looking for games to play. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. I'll see you next time.